Doje Shangi Compagnie Toshu. Okay, let's do the 4 limitless contemplations, if you can. Thanks, Bill. May all beings have happiness and create the causes of happiness. May they all be free from suffering and creating the causes of suffering. May they all, just let me get it. May they find that noble happiness which can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal impartial compassion, free of worldly bias towards friends and enemies. Semjen damje dewatang dewe jutang den pa jutik, dungal tang dungal chichu tang trawa jutik, dungal mepe dewa tampatang mindrawa jutik, nering chaktang ni tang drawe tang nom chimpola ni pa jutik. Never mind, Bern, don't worry about it. Just leave it, drop it. Hello, Mans. It's so nice to see you. Okay. Oh, Patricia, I'm so happy to see you too. Okay. So today, and you look lovely. Today, I'm doing, the second part of, is there a place for individuality, self, on our Buddhist path? Because we always told by all the lamas, no, we haven't got any self. We've got to get rid of it. It's all made of, of all the components of form, feelings, perceptions, habits, and consciousness. And no, there's nothing really there. And that's actually a total truth. However, what I've been beginning to realize more and more, and that's what we were talking about last week, is that we do need our individuality, but we do not need to actually attach to that individuality. We don't need to attach to it in any way. We need to use it and not attach. And as soon as it becomes ego and ego grasping, then it's something else. That's what we've got to really try and avoid in our lives. So I want to just start with some stories, and also just with the beautiful quote, which comes in White Tara. And really, you should all use this, because I think it's the most beautiful quote that you could ever really have. It goes like this. Shunyata Janana Benza Sobawa Emaho Ham. That's in Sanskrit. And what it means, even if you don't know the Sanskrit, what it means is I am the embodiment of the Vajra nature of emptiness and wisdom. So I'll read that again. I am the embodiment of the Vajra nature of emptiness and wisdom. Shunyata Janana Benza Sobawa Emahoham. Now, when I do that in the White Tara practice, when I say that mantra, I use it often because I actually want to remember that I'm the embodiment of the Vajra nature of emptiness and wisdom. It's such an important quote because we are the embodiment of emptiness. Jilly, I'm so happy to see your little face. Relax, my darling, okay? But it's good to see you with a camera, okay? But when we actually look at it, I am the embodiment of the Vajra nature of emptiness and wisdom. That's it. And what it means is that my appearance is completely empty, emptiness, which means full of potential, empty, and wisdom, both of them together, or appearance and emptiness, it doesn't matter. But what we're doing in our individuality is an appearance, but actually we are the embodiment of the Vajra nature of emptiness and wisdom. And once we know that, then when we're failing when we're really failing in our attempt in our lives, when we think, God, what am I doing with this? How could I have got there? How did I get this pneumonia? How did I get these children? How did I get all of this? We remember that we are the embodiment of the Vajra nature of emptiness and wisdom. So wherever we are, that's the base. That's what's got to come through. And somebody was saying to me last week in a session with this person, they were saying to me, you know, but Melanie, what should I do about this, this, and this? And I answered like Ekong Rinpoche or Lama Yeshe would answer me, do nothing. If you look at breaking down nothing, nothing is no thing. So don't do no thing. Just open yourself to your Vajra nature of emptiness and wisdom and let it work through you. That's what we want to do with our individuality. If we lose sight of that, if we're so busy on our mission, even when we're giving service, you know, a lot of us, when we're giving service, we think we're doing such a lot. And then we see somebody else who's so amazing, selfless, and just giving their whole life sacrificed for other people and everything. And you think, God, I'm not doing that. So you remember that. Now, I want to read you this really silly story, which I got years ago in a professional letter.
Can I say something?
Oh, please, please.
What I want to say, now I've lost my train of thought, but you know what? We must never, ever feel that we are not giving as much as the next person. We're giving what we can give, and that's enough.
Yeah, it is. And as we go on and on, I mean, we need sleep. Ekong Rinpoche never slept at night. I promise you, he never slept more than 2 hours a night. Also, Lama Yeshe, while he's been in, he's up. But I can't do that. I can't sleep 2 hours a night and function the next day. But they function on the wind energies. They don't function on what we function on. Do you know what I mean? So yes, we can only do as much as we can do. When I'm finished teaching a group, I'm really tired. I can't go straight out and help people. I've got to go and lie down for at least a half an hour, and then I can function again. So the point is that you're absolutely right, Gail. We each do it to our capacity. Now, what I want to give you is, if it came from a professional association, this story. When I got it, I laughed so much because it was years ago till the tears came out. Now I'm not laughing so much, but I'm reading you it because it's so funny. And it was called A Bit of Inspiration, Be Yourself. And it said, ever since I was a little kid, I didn't want to be me. I wanted to be like Billy Whittleton, and Billy Whittleton didn't even like me. And I walked like he walked. I talked like he talked, and I signed up for the high school he signed up for, which was why Billy Whittleton changed. He began to hang around Herbie van der Man. I love these names as well. And he walked like Herbie van der Man. He talked like Herbie van der Man. He mixed me up. I began to talk and walk like Billy Whittleton, who was walking and talking like Herbie van der Man. And then it dawned on me that Herbie van der Man walked and talked like Joey Haviland, and Joey Haviland walked and talked like Corky Saberson. So here I am, walking and talking like Billy Whittleton's imitation of Herbie van der Man's version of Joey Haviland, trying to walk and talk like Corky Saberson. I love the name. And who do you think Corky Saberson is always walking and talking like? Of all people, Dopey Wellington, that little pest who walks and talks like me. I laughed when I got it. I still laugh a little bit when I read it, but it's so hilarious for our journey, for examining who we are in this individuality and individuation and all of that, especially in our impressionable teens to early adulthood. Different people make different impressions on us, and we often want to be like them. And I remember as a teenager going and staying with my very, very posh aunt in Cape Town one year. And she told my aunt, who told me, that I was a horrible little girl. That's what she said. She said I was selfish. I was into myself. I went out till all hours of the night. You know, I was in my teens and everything. I went out till all. She really said this, and my aunt, the one aunt, really probably took pleasure in telling me this. You know, it was her thing to tell me, you know, how bad I was and everything. But when I look back, oh my God, we were always copying everything, doing what other girls did, going wherever. I'm quite pleased that I went through that horrible age, because you can look back and see what this self really is about. And today, with social media, it's incredible what influences our state of being. What people post is so often fake or false perceptions of what they want others, how they want others to perceive them. So that's not just a teenage story, it's blooming well an adult story with social media. And think about how temporary all of this and how little it has to do with our true nature, our Vajra wisdom and emptiness. It's all phony roles to make our egos feel more safe and secure. And people copy other people. Do you know that I told you when I was in the game reserve and my daughter and granddaughter were having this discussion in the back of me? I didn't know anything. I couldn't even understand their discussion. It was on technology. It was on social media. It was on. So I did not understand a word of what they were saying. Can you believe it? But I didn't tell them. I thought, I'm not going to say, I don't know what you're talking about. You know, I just kept quiet so they can go a little bit goading me. But the point is, it's just so true. It's so true. Now, when we're talking about the good side of individuality, which is what I'm trying to do, to say, how can we use that good side without ego grasping? That's what we're trying to do here. And I think that we all use social media, you know, we use this and that and the other about how we are. So this Zen story went very well. Ketchu, the great Zen teacher of the Meiji era, whenever that was the head of Tofuku, a cathedral in Kyoto. One day, the governor of Kyoto called upon him for the first time. His attendant presented the card of the governor, which read, Kitagaki, governor of Kyoto, and he gave him the card. He was there to see him. I have no business with such a fellow, said Kachi to his attendant. Tell him to get out of here. The attendant carried the card back with apologies. That was my error, said the governor, and with a pencil, he scratched out the words governor of Kyoto and gave the card back and said, ask your teacher again. Oh, is that Kitake? Exclaimed the teacher when he saw the card. Yes, I want to see that fellow. You know, that's how the Zen teachers teach us. If you're coming to see me, I'm not interested that you're the governor of Kyoto. I want to see you as a human being with your uniqueness, not with your label. That's very interesting when you look at that, because, you know, how many times do people tell me, but I feel I feel so much less than other people, and I haven't got any titles, and I haven't got degrees, and I haven't got, and what does it really mean in the end? What does it really mean? Those are just entrees into this world. I'm going to give you a chance to debate if you want to, because I really think these are things you can debate about and share your feelings. But just one other little story. In the last century, a tourist from the USA came to visit a famous master renowned for his wisdom who lived in Eastern Europe. He was astonished to see that this renowned master's home was only a simple room with some text, and the only furniture was one table and a bench. Master, where is your furniture? He asked. Where is yours? Replied the master. Mine, but I'm only a tourist passing through here. So am I, said the master. So if we remember that we are only a tourist, might help me packing up my house and all my pictures and all my everything that I've accumulated over years. It might really help me, because he says I'm also passing through. And you know, when you get to my age and stage of life, and you've been teaching for 100 years, and you've been, you know, and you've been counseling, and you've got case histories, and you've got a whole cupboard full of everything. It's quite an interesting thing, because if I'm going to go out of my house, if it does eventually get sold, what do I need? What do I want? How much does the I need? And what space do we need? And how much do we need? These are the questions we've got to ask. And just one last thing, then I'll throw it open. Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche was listening to all the questions of these people in Vancouver. And the next session that he had, he said, all the questions that you asked me last week were about relative matters. He said, the Buddha was asked 14 questions, relative questions, you know, and he always answered most, but he says he didn't answer. And he said the answer was actually no answer. Now think about it, because he said one of the questions was, when did everything begin? He said, if you look at Genesis, it says, in the beginning, in the beginning. If you look at, in Buddhism, there wasn't a beginning in Buddhism. Beginning, ending, Genesis or eternalism, you know, there's this God eternally, Armageddon, nihilism, not the ultimate truth, but is pain and sweat. And he said to them, Mahayana looks at the world differently, because the root of what you are asking is I, me. And the whole world is based on I and then am. I am. That's what the whole world is based on. And he says, because there's no end, there's no endless. Maybe there's endlessness, but there's no endless. And it frees us from the fear of death. And all our questions are relative, and we need to transcend this. Such an interesting thing, I thought that was. So I'm throwing all of these out to you, and then we're going on. We're going to look at individuality and individuation and what the difference is, which is quite important there. But maybe people want to comment, because it's so interesting when you're looking at yourself and you see how different you are over the years. I'm a completely different person to what I was in my early years. I'm actually totally different. And even your children can't see when you change and you transcend something, even they can't see. So maybe someone wants to ask or comment, and then we'll go on to last week's stuff. Anyone, please feel free. And it doesn't matter what your questions are, ask them, because it's really important, this looking at individuality and how much of ourselves can we retain and how much do we have to let go, and how much of us can actually keep in touch with I am the embodiment of the Vajra nature of emptiness and wisdom. We forget that when we're caught in things. And I must tell you that every day I ask Guru Rinpoche for the binding of all the evil leaders in the world. And it's quite interesting that this Raisi of Iran was in this terrible accident, and they can't find his body anywhere and everything. I mean, I had to actually think, and I thought, I said out aloud, my husband said it wasn't very nice, but I said out aloud, and if you think that Allah's going to welcome you into the heavenly kingdom because you've killed and had so many people killed, I wonder how your deluded mind is going to react to things when you actually see that what you're left with is nobody punishing you, just your own creations of your own mind. That's what you're left with. And if they really, I mean, that man has ordered the killing, even when he was in the Justice Department, or when he was a judge or whatever he was, he's ordered the killing of millions of people in the most terrible ways. Now imagine what his mind is like, and they think that's brilliant because they want to make everybody really radical like themselves, and so they think they've really done a great thing and Allah's waiting for them. So interesting, to have a deluded mind. Anyone ask, say. Nick, I'm happy to see your beautiful face. Do you want to say something?
Sorry, no, I had a delivery arrive at 10, so it was the worst time. I had to wait for them to leave. So I was listening, but I didn't have the camera on.
I do understand that completely, but I like it. Even little Jilly lying there, she's going through struggles in her life at the moment. It's beautiful when I can see your faces. Then it's so meaningful to me. Then I can see if you're down on your bed, or if you're really poor Bern, sitting there with her white face, and feeling terrible. And when you bow down to your pneumonia, Bern, and you say, thank you for giving me this wonderful chance to clear everything, all my debts, all my karmic imprints. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Anyone want to say? Then I'm going to go on, but I love it if you make.
I will say something, because I've actually also been reading a lot on this topic lately and really like contemplating it, because it's so interesting, because at some point, are we tricking ourselves into still the concept of a self in a subtle way? And actually in the Dzogchen teachings, they teach that there are two concepts of self. Now, I can't remember the Tibetan names, but the one concept of self is probably what we would align mostly to our ego. Okay. It's like the sense of, I'm great, or I'm not as good as this person, or, like all of these concepts and ideas that we have around ourself. And in some ways, that's the easier part of the self that we can work with. But then there's this other concept of self, which is a much more subtle sense of self. And that's the sense, it's like a background sense of self. And that's the sense of self that you've sort of had with you throughout your life. And as you say, can change. But there's still a sense that there is a being or an identity or something attached to you. And in the ultimate sense, we actually need to transcend both of those. And I think it's important to, even the language we use is, there's not like, just as an example, like I'm not an embodiment of something because there's no I to be an embodiment of, or even upon, say, for instance, death, there's no I or self that hopes to go to a particular place. So I think but in a relative sense, of course, there is the sense of I. So I think it's this constant reminding ourselves, although we're working with it in a relative sense, there's this constant releasing of still a hope or a wish or anything that connects us with this separate identity. But it's quite subtle. So I wanted to.
I love that what you're saying, because Rob Priest talks a lot about the I just want to see if I can find that. I will get to it at some stage, but it was really good on basically what you were saying. Just let me see where it is, if I can find it quickly. If I can't, then I won't.
Whilst you're looking for that, I mean, I think the example I was thinking of was a raindrop. So a raindrop falls from the cloud, and for that duration of its fall, whilst it's manifest as a raindrop, it believes itself to be a raindrop. Right. And there's a sense of, there's a raindrop that started the journey and will end the journey. But as it falls, it may go through lots of different experiences. But eventually there's this release into the the body of water. Now, we would know with our rational mind that if the raindrop fell into the ocean or a lake, it wouldn't continue to see itself as a separate raindrop, because it recognizes it's
of the lake.
But there's still this sort of sense as we go through our journey of the sort of subtle sense of being an individual raindrop, which is a bit of a different sense to being egotistical. The raindrop doesn't have to say, I'm the best raindrop, but there's still a separate sense.
But you know what you're saying? I'll tell you what he says. He says, when we can see ego grasping, that is at the heart of so much of the individualism in our culture, it does not mean we will no longer seek individual expression for who we are. Ego grasping is a deeply rooted disposition to contract and solidify our identity around a wounded sense of self. Now, that's so interesting, because you know what? It's quite interesting because, you know, some people are going to be very arrogant because maybe they know quite a lot of knowledge in the world, or they're an expert in this, or they're an expert in that. Now, if you could use that knowledge as a beautiful, this is my little identity in this life. It's a little identity compared to all the identity. And this wisdom that I've got about this or this or this is wonderful. I can use it in negotiating the world. That would be fine. But the ego grasping comes around a wounded sense of self. So there are a lot of people, for example, that might have gone through a very difficult childhood. Maybe they really had parents who couldn't give them things, and who couldn't help them in any way, who couldn't do them. I was just busy with one particular girl who, when her mother comes to visit, her whole personality changes. It's like she becomes that wounded self. Now, if we're coming from a wounded perspective with our identity, then the individuality is of no assistance whatsoever, because we're bringing that wounded identity into this world. And that's where the Buddhism helps us to understand that there is no wounded identity. Simply the wounds you went through were simply the karmic input and creation that you'd done before. And these were the best circumstances to have a chance to work through it and finish with it. Now, how do we finish with it when, if somebody walks into the room and picks on a part of that wounded self in the same way that, say, our father did or our mother did, and there we are back with it, even though we're doing lovely work on another level? Do you all understand what I'm saying? It's that we need to drop the wounded self. We need to look at it, nurture it, understand it, and drop it. I mean, James Lowe's guru always said, blah, 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 blah. You go on and on and on and on and on and on with all your justifications, all your angers, all your stuff, blah, 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 blah. He said, say it and finished. You know, we can't finish, especially when we've had a deep, wounded childhood. We can't finish. It just takes one pause in the room and we're back into it. Do you all understand? Because I think what Nicola is saying is really important. And we've got to say, wow, yes, I did have this terrible time. Yes, I was raped. Yes, I was a hostage that got all this stuff done to me and everything. Now, how am I going to go on in the world? I need to look at that. I need to deal with it. But then I need to move on, using it to really make my individuality something really compassionate and beautiful. But we can't. Why? Because Sem, the human mind, not sem ni, the Buddha mind or the awakened mind, because sem takes over, and then sem's going blah, 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 blah in our ears. Look at this person. Look what he just said to me. Look how horrible it is. Look how he criticized me. Look at this. We blah, blah, blahing out into the world, and we back into the ego-grasping, wounded self. How do we change that? See, Lynn, I could just see your little ponytail and your two eyes just move you up a bit. She's so cute. You look like a little thing. So I'm looking at childhood in you. How do
you know, asking how do you change this? I think you change when you're awake and you say, what can I do now? And forget about your ego, because it all has to do with ego. If you know that we're all one and we're not dividing other people, because that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
So if you just say, what can I do right now to enhance this moment? I'm with the other person, and forget the ego and forget everything else and be in the present moment and try to offer something. You know, I think it has to do that you don't appreciate the present moment and how precious life is.
And how it's moved from that, whatever it was that was really killing you off.
Yes.
But you see, what you're not taking into account here, Bet, is that the ego doesn't necessarily say, oh, how, look at this person, what a cheek they've got. The ego is subtle. The ego grasping is subtle. It doesn't actually just say, look what this person's done to me. What it does, which is so interesting, is it just sends little messages making you insecure, a little this, and then you say, I can't help it, you know. So what you're saying is 100% correct. But when the ego is wounded, it can't help itself. That's why I'm teaching on a Tuesday night. Have a look at the practices that really help your wounded ego.
Yes.
Because wounded egos in the right place at the right time, had the right parents, the right situation, the right everything. But that wounded ego is so subtle. It just creeps little messages into us. And that's where we've got to really be careful, you know.
Yeah.
Please. Edith, go on. We can't hear
so you really have to, I guess, you've got to take the wound and heal it. And you've got to look at what caused the wound was actually a gift to make you who you are, you truly are. And that's the way you have to, I guess, look at it.
And how do you get to look at it like that? When you wake up, yeah, you do. You examine it. And also, like what you're saying is so true. But people find it so difficult. You do not understand that I watch people so often. Like I'm thinking of one particular person now who was doing brilliantly, soaring the skies. And I thought, right, she's on her way. Okay. Now, this last week, something happened. And she's actually reverted right back to what she was before, the wounded ego. I mean, you know, the only thing you could do not to do that is have the tool of awareness. I'm doing it.
That comes from examining it, doesn't it? I mean,
it does. But how many times should you examine it? How many times do we need to examine it?
Until it's healed.
So if that takes an entire life, is that okay? I mean, you know, I'm not being,
I don't know.
I'm being serious. You
I
know,
know, but if it takes an entire life, then it takes an entire life.
yeah,
You know, I mean,
you're right.
otherwise, even you could try and fast track it through, but you should, if you're examining it all the time, eventually you look at the wound and you go, okay, that was really a gift, and why it was a gift. I mean,
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm just telling you my experience with people, that I just see them revert back to that ego grasping and that ego nature. It's unbelievable because, you know, and I think Rob Priest gives us a lot of ideas on it. And I think everybody, that Vajrayana practice is one of the best things you could do if you want to have an identity that is more like your nature than like your physical self. And let's talk about that, because James Lowe speaks about this all the time, about when you're doing deity practice, if you understand this is not a deity that is over there that I'm calling all the time. You can call on the deity, but the deity isn't over there. The deity is inside us, and we just can't understand that. We just can't understand that we have 100 deities inside us, and that, you know, one of them is really enabling you to go out of yourself into, so to speak, another self, but a self which is liberated, okay? And I know, for example, that when you have a practice that is very, very meaningful to you, when you have, and you do the Guru Yoga together with it, when you have a practice that is meaningful, you'll find that you are attracted to a deity which is the universe way of saying, become more like this. This is also a pure illusionary body. Yours is an impure illusory body. The one of Chenrezi or Tara or Guru Rinpoche is a pure illusory body. It's still an illusory body. But when you can step outside of yourself into that, then you are able to see that you can have many identities and that some of these identities can be pure. I was doing White Tara yesterday. Now, White Tara, her characteristics are so exquisite. She's called the wish-fulfilling wheel. Okay, the wish-fulfilling wheel. What does that mean? I used to think that she had the wish-fulfilling wheel. Then I learned she was the wish-fulfilling wheel. And what does that mean? That means you are so compassionate that you are the wish-fulfilling wheel. So if somebody is in any kind of pain, they can get whatever they need from you and carry on with their lives. So it's a totally magnificent concept. She's got purity, she does healing, she gives long life, and she is a wish-fulfilling wheel in basic practice. So when you do the practice, you make yourself, I try and envisage what it's like in her pure realm with everything white and pure and people being happy and everything. I try and imagine that. And then when I'm finished the practice, I try and take it out with me into the rest of the day and the rest of the world. So you have an opportunity, open portal to unity, to actually change that wounded self, that ego grasping that you've got. I'm glad to see your pretty face, ego. It's nice, thank you. So it's amazing. So when we do practices, which a lot of people don't understand, especially in the West, we interrupt this drama. We interrupt this drama, this individuality, when we do tantric practice. We become the deity and step out of the Melanie personality eventually these two can combine and they change and expand our individual nature. And usually the deity practice that you are attracted to, the deity practice you are attracted to, is actually what you're needing to add into your life in this particular lifetime. Because you might change it over lifetime, means that's what you really need. So when I came into Tibetan Buddhism, and I just heard the word green Tara, and it was a deep pool. I remember Tanya, some of you might have been there when Tanya was actually teaching us green Tara, and complex. Were you there, Luz? It was a complex practice. I mean, all the hand movements and everything. I just learned it like a fish to water. I needed green Tara in my life. Green Tara is action accomplishment. She's swift. She's beautiful. She's young. She's energetic. She's the wisdom of perfected action. And I needed her before I understood any of this. So I just took her. I took her into my being. And for years, I did the long practice of Tara every single morning, every day. There was no compromise on it. And it was something I really needed. And I've told you this, that Beryl, who's the teacher in Cape Town, once saw me right in the beginning of my Buddhist thing, doing Tara in the shrine room in Cape Mountain Retreat. And she said to somebody who told me that, she said to them, God, this girl's been doing it for years. I'd probably been doing it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks when I was at Cape Mountain Retreat. She thought I'd been doing it for years because it just resonated. It was what I needed to add to my individuality. And then at one point in time, I thought, okay, this is enough. Now I'm going on to white Tara. It seemed more to recognize what I want. And in the Vajrayana practice, you've got something called the pride of the deity. Now, in our actual stuff, in our lives, in our normal physical lives, pride is a very negative word, and you avoid it like anything. So why do they call it the pride of the deity? Because the deity has no arrogance and no pride that needs to be, changed. The pride of the deity is a kind of a thing that resonates with you. So you are the deity. You are that in your practice. You bring it in. If you're doing Chenrezi, there are people that really do Chenrezi, and Chenrezi is simply compassion. And you bring it into your life. And at the end of a life, we have to surrender everything, even that, and go into spaciousness. So we can't grasp onto the ego. We can't grasp onto our family. We can't grasp onto anything. I mean, Patrul Rinpoche and all of them teach, even if you attach to a ball of cotton, don't. It can spoil your death and dying. And what we have to look at is we are all held in the jaws of Yama, the Lord of Death. And the greatest miracle is that we are able to survive and engage in life. What for? Why do we engage in life? What are we doing here? Why aren't we in one of the Pure Lands? What are we doing in this life? Jilly, with you lying in your bed there, my heart's going out to you. What are we doing in this life, Jilly? I mean, we're doing so many strange things, aren't we? I mean, what are we doing in this life? Poor Jilly. She's wondering about that. Anyone want to say anything? Just butt in if you want to
We're
say.
learning. We're learning.
What are we learning?
Well, how can good stuff be good if you don't understand bad stuff?
Is that a fact? I'm challenging you.
I
That
don't. Well, I believe it is, because like when you've had a really, really, really bad experience
Yeah.
and you've sort of lived through it, and then sometime later you have a really, really good experience, that good experience is just so much more rewarding because you understood how bad the bad was. So, and that everything isn't bad. There's got to be some good too. I just think this is like a learning station.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But it's so interesting because we say that about the negative when we're trying to get someone to look at the positives in life when they're really going through a negative. But do we have to have it? Now, Manjushri, for example, when you say his prayer, apparently when he was in life, he just knew. He knew what he was, he knew where he was going, and he always knew it. He didn't have to go through the devious routes that we all have to go through to get there. So I'm not sure that you have to go through the negative in order to get to the positive, but you can use the negative to jump to the positive for absolute sure. But we're looking at individuality. We're looking at how much of our individuality can we take? How much are we adding in, to it? And how much of our ego identity and our personality? Because when our personality and our ego identity become stronger, they can also become less flexible. They can be rigid. So our capacity for adaptation and change slowly freezes and limits our ability to find the truth and wake up. And if we do wake up, then as Gail says, life circumstances will demand we face ourselves. And that's a big challenge. I think that one of the most difficult things in our whole life is to face ourselves. Now, Buddha Shakyamuni was born, like I know, ultimately he was already enlightened, but relatively he was born into this prince's life, and his father shut him in because the prophecy said that he'll either be a religious man or he'll be the king of the empire. And the king wanted him to be the king of the empire, so he locked him in. And then one day he sneaked out of the palace walls and saw death, sickness, and aging and asked what they were. But if you look at him, he was in luxury. He was in good circumstances. He had everything. He had all the princesses of the neighboring things throwing themselves at his gorgeous feet. He had everything. He found a lovely woman and a child. But there was something inside him that needed to break away and find the truth. Now, all these enlightened beings, that's their story. It's got all these points. Why did they need to break away? Why would somebody break away from an absolutely divine life, so to speak? He said he needed to find something else. This wasn't it. This wasn't everything. And so he had a growing call within, and then he sneaked out with nothing and went out into the world, and then later came back and taught his father, his mother, didn't have his mother, his father and all the people in the palace, what it was really all about. But the suffering that he put himself through when he could have just stayed there, why didn't he stay there? He could have been a good king. He could have helped people. He could have done everything. Why did he want to break away? Because he said, there's something there that I really need to do and need to find. And you know what? I myself, in my life, I had a pretty okay life, you know, the usual nonsense that we all have in our lives and everything, but I had a pretty good and okay life. And, you know, it's such an interesting thing, because why was I looking for spirituality? There was something that I was always looking for. And then my mother-in-law died very young. She was in a very early 60s. She was fit and okay. She just had a heart attack and died. And that set off my journey. And from then on, I wanted to find out more. And it's so interesting, because when people came to our house en masse and were talking about it, I was telling them about death and things like that, which I never knew the first thing about. I assure you, I was much too selfish and spoiled to even think about that, you know. And yet that was what awakened in me. And then I had to search and find. And it took me a long time to come to the Buddhism and find it and find what I wanted. But either we've got that desire to change something in us, or we don't. And sometimes it is from negativity, and sometimes it is from a call inside. And then sometimes in the West, we split our spirituality in our daily life, okay? And we have sometimes split it off. So this is where I do my spirituality, and this is where I do my daily life. We have to bring it all together, which is so important. It's really important to think of all these things. That's why I brought this. And Rob Priest does the challenge of individuation and individuality, which is really important. So let's do a little meditation. Anybody want to say anything before we do? Because last week we were really talking about, I want to give you Rob Priest's stuff. And remember that his life was such that he had a lot of woundedness in his childhood. And then he became a therapist, but he was also a very deeply into Tibetan Buddhism. And he actually found from all of his life that when he was busy doing all the practices and when he was busy on that life, what he found was that his woundedness interfered all the time in his spiritual path. Now, that's a very interesting thing, because, you know, we want our woundedness, as you said, Edith, to heal. We want it to heal, and we really want it to be completed and finished. We really want to. But it's really important, he said, that even when he was going on the journey and he had wonderful teachers, his woundedness kept coming up all the time. And then his famous story was of this very great friend that they all had in the Buddha Dharma. And he was very, very knowledgeable, and he was good, and he served everybody, and he did everything according to the teaching. And nobody knew he was a drug addict. He kept it absolutely secret. And he did his whole spiritual life helping and everything, and then would often go and take drugs. And in any case, to cut a long story short, he committed suicide on his drugs. And the whole Sangha was absolutely in shock. What in heaven's name could this good guy who was serving everybody, what could he have committed suicide for? And when they went into it, they found that what he had done was he'd kept the dark shadow, the woundedness, separate from his life, from his spiritual life. In his spiritual life, he was doing all the practices, he was doing helping, he was serving, he was doing an amazing thing, but he kept his dark side to himself, because that he thought was unacceptable. But we've got to understand that that woundedness is made of the same energy as what we call goodness as everything we've got. It's the same energy, but he couldn't confront it openly. So he confronted it when he came home and he was in a bad way and everything, and he didn't tell anybody about it. Now, what I wanted to say to you, Ed, is that what's very important when you're looking at that woundedness is that you've at least got a spiritual friend, a guru, a teacher, somebody, a therapist, somebody that can actually help you, that is there for you when you need to face your darkness. Because a lot of people on a spiritual path, and Rob Priest talks about this a lot from his friend, a lot of people think that being spiritual means you're this wonderful person. You don't have emotions, you help people, you serve. Bullshit, excuse my language. It's rubbish. We've still got our human part. And that's what this is about. Taking our individuality and looking at it for what it is. Now, Bern, you always like everything to be perfect in your life. You like everything to be organized and everything. And it's absolutely wonderful. I mean, to have you looking after the group and doing all the prayers is the most wonderful thing. But maybe you have to look at the disorganized or the fearful part of you that doesn't like everything. Now, today happened, and it's a good thing that it happened, because everybody knows you do everything perfectly. If anyone asks you for anything, you're there to do it for them. You've got it all in order. I've told you, when she saw my book, when I was in Australia last year, and she saw my prayer book, okay, she went, oh my God, give me this book. I'll sort it out for you, because it had food marks. It was upside down. It was dirty. It was everything, because I use it all the time. I take it with me wherever I go, and then I do the prayers and everything. She was horrified at me. I said, don't worry about it. It's okay. You can do it another time, but think about it. Do you all know what I'm doing? I'm not picking on Bern. She doesn't need to be picked on today. She needs our support for her pneumonia. Yeah, Mimi, say.
I was just thinking to go back on when you spoke about how do you change. Now, Nicola gave that incredible lecture on the magic of awareness. And I think the whole thing is, of course, you have to look at it. There are techniques to calm yourself down. But one of the main factors for me is you have to decide. You want to stop that storyline, those stories that you continuously tell yourself. And slowly but surely, that will build with training and also using, I find, the wisdom of the Dharmadhatu, the Varashana, because that is a very good technique for that open blue spaciousness to dissolve our stories and delusions. And I think with training, you can face that woundedness and dissolve that storyline that continues forever, can continue forever.
I think you are 100% right. But what you've got to understand, all of you, is it takes time, depending on how deep the imprint is. And a lot of you are impatient when those things come back. Okay, you say, oh, look at me. It takes time. And this book that Rob Priest is teaching about is called The Wisdom of Imperfection. Not the wisdom of perfection, the wisdom of imperfection. How can we use our imperfection and into our individuality and be able to really change our lives?
It's training. I think we've got to train and train and train.
Exactly.
Not
Let's start the training right now. Okay. So I'm going to mute everybody so we don't get your individual noises. And then I want you to just get into your meditation posture. Please unmute yourself after the meditation, because I love it when you all give your things. I think it's so relevant, and it's got to be relevant because this kind of subject matter is not my best subject matter to teach. I like teaching Dzogchen and all kinds of things like that. But what I realize is that this is what people are needing now. And I've got to be absolutely aware of changing people and not just doing what I think. So let's get into a meditation posture. And I want you to breathe in and breathe out. And keep your eyes open. It's really important because when you close your eyes, you shut yourself out. When you open your eyes, you're actually in touch with everything. Now, it's so interesting because yesterday, as I was driving yesterday, I switched on Tupton's beautiful lecture on ancient wisdom for modern times. I switched it on in my car. And he was actually saying right in the beginning, what is meditation for? And when we look at what is meditation for, it's actually to incorporate your whole spirituality into the whole world. So as you're breathing in, you're taking in that fresh, clean, blue, open, spacious energy. You breathe it in to the count of 3 or 4, and you breathe it out to the count of 3 or 4. As you breathe it out, it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing of letting be. Letting go is okay, but letting go means there was something to let go of. Letting be is opening everything out. I said to Jilly the other day, Jilly, your hands must be sore because you've been holding so long, you've been carrying so long. Open your hands, everybody. Open your hands and just let everything go. All the balloons, let it be that you've been holding on to, keeping this one alive and helping this one and keeping your head above water, and financial problems and professional problems and work problems and everything. As you breathe in the fresh nature of the Dharma Dhatu. That's the essence, the ground, the base of everything in our lives. We forget. We become so engrossed in what is happening in our lives, in all the things, in all the stuff we have to do, in all the things that come out of the ground, especially the impure things, that we are totally involved with them and we don't go back to the base. Let's go back to the essence. Om. I am the Vajra embodiment of awareness and wisdom. That is what you are. And when you breathe in and out, you allow this. But you also look. What we were all talking about this morning is coming to this present moment, being absolutely okay. That was Betty said, in this present moment, allowing everything to be. And then we look in deeply. We look in all the wounded self. What is it? It might come from now, it might come from a long time ago, it might come from someone you popping up, it might come from your mom or your dad. Whatever they did, whatever they didn't do, just have a look at it compassionately as you look at it and as you see yourself walking along the path. And take that child that's walking from a long way back and incorporate that right into your solar plexus. The child that's always worrying, the the child that was wounded, the child that was always scared of things happening, the child that needed the parents to do things, the child that lost a parent, the child that was unpopular at school, the child that had trauma, the child that might have been abused mentally or physically. Just look at it now. Whatever it was, pour out your love and compassion to that little girl or that little boy. And let them feel that you are grown up now, that you are the embodiment of many things, that your experience has brought you to this very moment, and you are able to incorporate that without going right into it and crying again and feeling sorry with yourself, without it being inflicted on your present life, without it involved at all. Just the fact that you are an experienced adult, and that you can take this into your life, into your essence. Your essence is vast, expansive, right as vast as the blue sky. And if there are some flaws, some wounds, you can take it into your being, and it can actually be right there as something you look at as a valuable lesson, valuable time, valuable for you in your life. But you don't have to be bogged down by it. You can look at it as many times as you want, acknowledge it, and you can allow it to be. It is what it is. It's there. It's there because you couldn't deal with it before. It's there because you created it in your karmic imprints. And we really, really, really have to understand and incorporate it with great compassion. It's part of you. And it's something, when you look at it, it does not have to be horrors. It's something that can be wisdom. It's something imperfect, which gives us wisdom. We can allow it to come to the surface. We can even tell people about it when they're going through trials and tribulations. We can actually say, you know, I also went through that, and this is what I did with it. We don't have to hide in the dark, as the friend of Rob Priest did. We don't have to hide our shadow. Jung said, each of us has a deep shadow part, no matter what kind of upbringing you have. You have a deep shadow part that's brought in from previous lifetimes. It's dark if we want to compare it, but it's also the wisdom of imperfection. It has given us great experience and great individuality. Because when we see another person who is battling, our heart goes out to them straight away. When we see someone who is ugly and who is using their power to subjugate people and hurt them, we look at them and we feel a compassion, because we know that they're doing this out of fear. They've got to be in control. Ego has to be in control. And so we win them over. We see through them. We make them stop covering up with their dominance. Today must be a turning point for all of you. No matter who you are, no matter how you've controlled your life, just to look and see that whatever you went through was all not in vain. It kept you alive, it kept you functioning, it kept you in every way doing everything that you need to do. And it's given you great wisdom. Use it. Don't hide it away in the closet. And don't become something that you aren't. Your individuality must be fresh, alive, awake. You don't want your spirituality split off from your life. But you don't want anyone to find out. Somebody was saying to me, oh my God, what if they found out about this and this and this? And I said to the person at work, and I said, those are the things you did for survival. You survived through those things. You didn't live. And so those things are very important to know and to accept. They were your survival, and now you do not need them to survive any longer. So embrace them. Embrace this whole life. This whole life is given to you. It's a schoolroom for your valuable lessons. Do this kind of practice a lot and open yourself out to all the negativity. It's really good. It's really good for you. It's so healthy. And it's so awful when you meet people who seem perfect to you. I mean, Lama Yeshe was always telling me about what a bad guy he was when he was younger. He says, he was so stupid. He was so idiotic. His brother was trying to teach him, and he was just so stupid. He just went out, he jawed around, he had women, alcohol, and all of that. And that's what makes him really understand us. He wasn't this perfect specimen, that nobody understands. Anyone want to say anything? Because what I want to do next time is really take individuality versus individuation. Individuation that Jung spoke about is really like coming to your Buddha nature. It's just Western terminology, but it's actually very, very similar to a bodhisattva path, your individuation. It's really when you become whole and round and you can attract people into your life. And Jung makes a differentiation between individuality and individuation, because individuation, you can use the wonderful qualities that you have to really on your spiritual path, where individuality can come from a wounded self. Anyone want to say anything or comment?
Mel, I just want to say, I think
Please.
that there's no rush in life, and there's like sort of such a strong narrative in the world today around being perfect and resolving all your trauma and healing and all of that there can be a sense of like urgency or time pressure. And I actually think if you've got one core issue or wound or whatever. And if that's all at the end of the day that you work through in this life, then that's wonderful. I think, yeah, there's a sense, I think even in spirituality, sometimes there's a sense of like rushing along and there's so much to do and there's so much to accomplish, when in fact, it's like just remembering that there is no rush and just slowing down. And I think that's what the gift of that present moment is the more we just drop into that awareness, just being in that awareness opens that space. It creates that, it broadens that space. And I think in everybody's journey, when you first come to this path, it's because you're suffering and you are trying to heal or you're trying to resolve a problem that you have. But then the more you do the practice, the more you do drop into awareness, into the moment, you do start to see that you're not in this limited container, that you're broader. And as you expand yourself, it allows space for other. And as soon as you have that broadened sense of self, which encapsulates the other, that bodhicitta arises, and then you've got more motivation to practice because it's no longer just for yourself. I just wanted to say there is no rush.
No, and that's such an important point. And you know, I learned so much from Matchik Lobdron, because she brought the chirp practice. And it's funny, last night I had this great need to do the chirp practice, especially after I heard of this helicopter accident, you know, in Iran. And because my manicurist was telling me, you know, that she was telling me, you know, how Iran controls our government and, you know, like all these things that they're doing, you know, at the ICJ to Israel and all of that. She says it's all controlled by Iran. So when I heard that this helicopter accident had taken place, I couldn't help feeling a little bit of glee, because I'd been calling to Guru Rinpoche, you know, please, let's bring it down. Let's let the poor people be free. They're so subjugated, especially the women and everything. It's just a horrible way of taking religion and everything. So last night I was doing my chirp practice, and I'll talk to you about the chirp practice, because that's one of the greatest ways of dropping ego grasping. And Matchik really took the chirp. What happened was she met this terrible monster in the water, and she was going to fight this monster. She had to get there. And suddenly she felt immense compassion for the monster. So what she did was she dissolved her body into nectar and gave the monster to drink. And then the monster he changed from being a monster into being a beautiful person. And that's the whole basis of what the Chur is about. And I'll tell you about it and how it was for me when I did it over a long period of time, and everybody in the retreat was doing it with their drums and bells. I'm a bit scared here because the neighbors can actually hear me when I'm doing it. It's loud and you do lots of songs, but the basic thing is dissolving your body and offering it to your own demons and to all the demons in the world, making them wake up to who they are, you know, rather than what we'd like to do is just subjugate them out of all being, that we can't help ourselves. That's our dark shadow side, you know. But the point is that Chur is the most wonderful practice to get rid of ego, because you dissolve the whole body and you feed all the dark things and you look at your own shadows. When I used to do it, I used to put all my dark parts of me in a row and then feed them with the nectar. You do the power practice, you go into higher dimensions, and then you are Vajrayogini and you chop up the body that's left there. You make it on a cooking thing, you make it into nectar, and then you feed all the demons. So you give all of them before you even start. And I found that a wonderful practice. And I find that when I'm really in quite a bad mood or bad state, and I do it, there's a short practice that came from the Chen Rezi Chur practice. I think a lot of you might have it, But if you don't, I'm very willing to rake it up and get it for you so you can actually do it. It's really, but let me teach you a little more about the chur next time. And we can look at that. Okay. Okay, everybody. But look, I'm much happier to have discussions in the group than just give you my own voice that goes on and on and on. I'm very happy for you to ask me anything and use this time period, as Nicholas said, to look at all the aspects of you that need to be gotten through and that need to change. And that's what's important. So let's dedicate, if you can, Boone, and to all people who are in darkness. And we'll do that individuation and individuality to all people who are in darkness, to all people who've been terrorized, to all people who've been killed in horrible wars, to all the people in the wars and all the people who've lost people, and to everybody who's in darkness. We dedicate, if there's just some sentence they could get out of it, then I'm really happy. And may whatever benefit that arises from this practice go to the benefit of all sentient beings. May they be freed from the ocean of samsara, stirred by the waves of birth, sickness, aging, and death. Sonam die tamche zipane topne nepe dranam pamshene jeganachi balap tropaye sipe sole dua dro warsho.